Charismatic Mexican cartoonist extraordinaire Gelada greets you amicably. Hello, friends. I welcome you to another episode in my ongoing Satanist Sells Satanism to You series. In this video, I will be talking about a concept that is very important, I think, is very, very important, which is the concept of the death of the author, or the concept of the author as function, which is the same thing, the death of the author. Basically, maybe you have heard of this, maybe you haven't. In the past, I think it would have been reasonable to expect people to know about this, but I feel that nowadays, not so much. The idea is just that when an author, writes, for example, a novel, or a director directs a film, people feel that he is the ultimate authority on what the film means. So, for example, if Steven Spielberg tells you that E.T., in his famous film, the extraterrestrial, is meant to represent, his long-lost cousin that drowned, once in Minnesota or something like that, you have to just accept that idea as final. And henceforth, when you watch E.T., you're supposed to just think about that poor, cousin of Spielberg's that drowned in Minnesota or something like that. Basically, the idea is just that the author, is the ultimate judge of what his work means, which is, of course, that idea that the author would be the one to say the final word on what something means is ridiculous. Imagine if I said that an author can, of course, tell you what the intent behind his work, what he thinks the intent behind his work is, but very often in art, an artist does not really know what he is talking about, I have discovered, for example, a lot of very mysterious things while crafting my comic books, my pictures, because that's the whole point of art. For artists, most of the time, is to create mysteries, things that are mysterious to ourselves as artists. Otherwise, you're just, you're not making art, you're making, illustration or something like that, where you're or just trying to convey a message visually, as opposed to getting lost in the process and aiming to really surpass yourself. Basically, is this, I would say, to surpass oneself is the goal of most of any artist worth something. So basically, the idea that the death of the author, meaning that the author is not the one to decree the ultimate meaning of a work, it would seem to be a very basic, very, logical, very obvious idea to me. And but people don't really think that way. People feel that things, people believe there is this external authority, and that would be the link, to Satanism, because the ultimate external authority is, of course, God. And people, think that things are objectively true or objectively untrue. And I think there is a huge difference between a final argument and a superior argument. For example, if you want to argue that the earth is, flat, that is an inferior argument to the argument that the earth is round. But of course, the earth is closer to being round than being flat. But it is actually not round. It is like an egg shape because it's sort of, because of centrifugal forces around the equator, it's sort of, it bulges out. And of course, if you want to be really strict, because it has, because of topography, because of valleys and mountains and oceans and cracks in the earth, as a shape, it is actually a very complex shape. So even if you were to say that it's egg shape, you would be omitting the existence, for example, of Everest, of Mount Everest, because you would be simplifying, And the idea is just that you can always find a new thing to say about any subject. You can always say something more. Therefore, there isn't really a final argument about anything. Things just go on and on and on. And they are sort of eternal. And and infinite. And we actually have, kind of scientific proof, like we have objective proof that there is not such a thing as an objective thing, because when you say objective, what you're really saying is final. The same objective is the same thing as saying final. When you say something is objectively true, it means that you're saying that it is true forever as the final word on the subject. That's the idea. And that, of course, does not work because, everything is a process in the world. The world is a dynamic place. It is constantly moving. Thoughts are constantly moving. Science, is even if things, they grow and they generate, they never stay still. So even if you were, for example, to discover the ultimate, imagine if you were to discover the ultimate truth of the universe, the final ultimate truth of the universe, you would look at the formula, but then you would have to look at it again or think about it again. And perhaps at first it would have seemed to be a very joyful thing. And the next moment it would seem a very disappointing thing. And then it would become a boring thing. And new, facets of it would necessarily occur to you. Because you'd keep thinking about it. And you'd keep, discovering new ways in which it interacts with yourself, with other things. Even if it's, the final truth of the universe, it is not by virtue of being an idea within your mind. It would continue to change, continue to evolve, and continue to gain new meanings. So it wouldn't really be final. And of course, an author cannot, say the final word on any of his works, because every new generation, for example, that reads Shakespeare discovers that, Shakespeare speaks to their age, it is magically always pertinent, always beautiful, well, at least so far. And so there is new meaning to be found in it. And there is even when something is a flat fact keeps, changing color. So there's that aspect to it. There's, of course, the aspect of, the fact that what makes an interpretation appear, final is just that it is superior to others. But there is always a deeper thought to be found. There is always something that is more powerful that you can articulate. That's really the key, a really big idea, that people are obsessed with this notion of final truth, of objective truth, and they think that there needs to be objective truth for the world to function. But that is not the case. The only thing you need for the world to function is superior truth, victorious truth. Because truth, is the same thing as all other phenomena. Any kind of argument just is striving against others and gains, at best, momentary supremacy. Only momentary supremacy. And it is, always replaced by something new. So there is no final truth, there is no final thing, there is the truth of the day. For example, Newton, the laws of thermodynamics, they are really valid and really powerful ideas, but they have been, superseded by quantum mechanics and weirder things. And that's the way of the world. So yeah. It is, this idea of the death of the author, the idea that new interpretations are valid contenders, at least in spirit, that perhaps, for example, if I were to propose an interpretation of Hamlet, and you were to compare my interpretation of Hamlet with a text that Shakespeare wrote, in which he talks about Hamlet, perhaps you would find Hamlet's, arguments to be superior to mine, or perhaps you would find mine to be superior to Hamlet's. But the point is not that the author is not allowed or is not, the point is not that the ideas that the ideas that an author may have about his own work are not interesting, or may not be really. They may very well be very convincing, and they may be even the most convincing. But it is not because he's the author. You for example, you could say that maybe the explanation that an author's psychoanalysts, imagine that Shakespeare had a psychoanalyst. He went to therapy, so he was unaware of many of the psychological structures that truly motivated him. But there was this other person that analyzed him, and that perhaps understood it or understood him, in a way that he couldn't understand himself. Imagine if you were to ask me about how my body functions. It is my body, but I would be unable to give you an explanation of the function of my body that would be, half as good as the one that a professional doctor in medicine would give you. So even though it is my body, I may very well be very ignorant about it. What do you know about how your brain works? Do you know about it? Do you know about the complex chemical and electrical interactions within your neurons? Are you an expert on the subject? You're not. Even though it is your body, you're very you may not be able to explain how it works, or maybe if you say why it works, you would give an explanation, but then someone else could come along and give an explanation that would be more convincing. And that really is the key. And I'm just going to tell you this because it's a really important idea, that people all the time, they say, I am not the judge. People will say, I am not the judge of what of things. I am not the judge. And they say that, and they don't realize how stupid they sound. Because when you say, I am not the judge, what you're saying is, I am the judge of who the judge is. You're the judge's judge, right? You're decreeing, you're judging yourself not to be the judge. And that's a really important thing and a really satanic thing. Because if you are always deferring internally to authority, you're always thinking about, external truth, objective truth, final truth, and what is really actually correct. You are the one that judges all of that stuff to be what it is. Do you understand that? You must understand that. That in reality, you are the one that is always the source of all authority. It is your authority, the authority of your mind, that orders and creates the world. If you were that interprets, the signals from your senses and puts together something for its own sake, you're not, in service to some sort of external truth. You are just, the ultimate source of authority in the world. And that is actually a very important and very powerful thought, I think. And one that, if you integrate it, you've come along, you take a big step toward being a Satanist, which means being, someone that does not really recognize any authority as being superior to its own. Because it understands that, of course, any authority that you perceive is an authority that you are actually, through your perception, granting power. When you judge something to be powerful, it is you that is, in reality, giving that thing its power through your mind. Of course, you may think that, hey, I am less powerful, for example, than a gorilla. That is not. So then I would not be the ultimate authority if I was locked in a cage with a gorilla. But the thing is that you have to think of yourself as a character within your mind. Right? In that way, you are not yourself. And that is the other dimension of the idea of the death of the author. That if I say, for example, Gelada kept talking and the listener kept listening, I moved us both, to this external person, and you realize that you are really just a character within your mind. People, when they talk, for example, about the fact that they care more about the lives of their family, especially their children or their significant other, their wife or their husband, what they're saying is really that they are pouring themselves onto another. Their sense of value is stronger in this other body. They value this other body more than they value their own body. But the reality is, because both are, the mind appropriates both bodies to the same extent. You can think about it like by thinking about telepresence, projecting yourself onto another body or a machine body. And you could, for example, do that and then interact with your own body from which you're, projecting yourself. You can look at yourself through a camera and sort of understand this very mysterious notion of the death of the author or the author assumption by having, an out-of-body experience. In video games, this is very, very common, where you say, hey, that's me, but you are looking at a character. And normally, if you're looking at a character, then that would not be you, that'd be another character. But in a video game, you project yourself onto a certain character, and you you control it with the video game controller, and then you move it around, but you think of it as yourself. When he gets hit, or when he dies, for example, while playing the game, you say, ouch, right? Or you wince. And it's the same thing when you're watching a movie or reading a book, where you pour yourself through empathy, you project yourself onto the different characters, and you start rooting maybe for one of them against, opposition or something like that. That is something that points, to the fact that you are, this ultimate source of authority, in the sense that the entire world is an illusion, not necessarily an illusion, but, a dream within your mind. It's the same thing as saying that if you were to die, the world would end. Your world would end, but you don't really have a way to interact with anything else, The world is a phenomenon in your mind, right? And maybe you can, debate a lot of different ways to say that. Maybe, is the mind or your mind, etc. But the idea is just that there is, this sort of structure of authority, and this entire world that you're perceiving, for it to exist, it can only do so within your mind, right? And you may be a character that your mind perceives and judges. Maybe you don't like yourself particularly. Maybe you would prefer to be another person, or you would just judge others to be superior. But you're judging others to be superior to that character, the character that bears your name. But that is, something you perceive. It is not really the authority. The central authority would be, the mind that judges and perceives, etc. Well, these are difficult ideas, and I've already talked too long, but that's it for this week's installment. I hope you feel a little bit more satanic, and you managed to extract some sort of value from my ramblings. And I hope you have a nice one. Take care. Take care.